Okay, everybody, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. So my talk today is going to be about how to motivate learners to read. And here you have the QR code. I will leave that there for you for a few moments or so. I have literally just made the slides in a PDF form for you. If you wish to download it and then watch as you go, that would be perfectly fine. Or you can just wait until the end and I'll give you the QR code one more time. So I'll just leave that there for a few seconds. So we're going to start today by just talking a little bit about what extensive reading is. And extensive reading is a way to help students to become fast, fluent readers. And when we talk about motivating students to read, this is what we're talking about. We're suggesting that they should be able to read smoothly and quickly when they read books, not so much when we're talking about textbooks. Textbooks are more for study than for building fluency and building reading speed. So let's just start a little bit with a quick review of the type of reading that I'm talking about. So what is extensive reading? Extensive reading is reading a lot of easy books to build reading fluency, reading speed, fluency, and build comprehension skills. In contrast to this, we have study reading, or sometimes called intensive reading. The reason for this is to intensively study the language, to learn new words, grammar, and language features, and build reading skills, and so on. A very easy way to tell the difference between the two, and for you to find out whether your students are reading extensively or whether they are studying, is to look at their hand. If they have a pen in their hand, they're probably doing study reading. They're probably learning to read, which is a bit different. So in the study reading, the idea here is to learn to read. That is, we use a textbook, worksheets, where you might have a test. Everything's done as a class. Students use the same material. Maybe you're working on phonics or the alphabet or vocabulary building or that type of thing. Maybe you're focusing on new words and grammar, reading skills, and text structure. And that's a lovely, fantastic, great thing to do. There's nothing wrong with this. Reading practice, on the other hand, is reading to learn. And we use graded readers. Students choose their own books. They focus on speed and fluency, and the main emphasis on comprehension and a natural reading speed. So when we're talking about ER, extensive reading, what type of materials do we use? Well, of course, we use storybooks. This is for extensive reading, to help students to read while they learn. Textbooks with exercises are great, but they are about study reading and they have a different purpose. Should the reading be easy or a little difficult? Well, clearly it should be easy, it should be achievable, it should be something they can do smoothly and quickly so they can read fluently. Should they be reading quickly or slowly? Of course, they should be reading quickly. This is to build reading speed and fluency. And if they have to stop every few seconds to look up a word, then they will not build fluency. And this is actually more like study reading. Should they be using a dictionary when doing extensive reading? Well, generally, no. If they're using a dictionary, that's a form of study. So therefore, we would tend to avoid asking students to use a dictionary. So we need to find reading texts, and they need to choose texts which they probably don't need a dictionary. And should they be studying vocabulary and grammar when they read, or reading for fun? Well, of course, in extensive reading, the idea is to do practice. As I say, and I will repeat, there's nothing wrong with study reading, but it's a very different purpose from reading practice. So as a reading teacher, we need to understand they have different aims. The aim of study reading and intensive reading is quite different from reading practice. And we're going to be today talking about this reading practice, about how we can help students to become fluent and better readers. So, as a teacher, what do you need to do to make sure that your class is actually reading extensively? Well, these are a list of things that you should do as a teacher. And this is your role as a teacher. When you're doing study reading, your job is to teach something or to help students understand something, teach vocabulary, go through the textbook, and that's fine. But for extensive reading, your role changes. You need to check and understand why the students need to read extensively. Explain to them they need to build reading speed. You need to check they're reading books at the right level, that they are studying, not studying, they are actually learning and building fluency. You need to check that they understand their books. So maybe you need to do some comprehension check activities. Maybe you need to ask them to tell you the story and so on, just to make sure that they do actually understand. Make sure they're doing enough reading, and not just 1 or 2 minutes a week is not enough. You're going to be needing probably somewhere between 30 minutes to an hour a week of reading. So we're going to need some silent reading time in class. If you can do that, if not, then assign some of this for homework. So definitely they need to make sure they're doing enough reading. Make sure that they can select the appropriate books at their level. So you need to train them to be able to find books at their level. If they're finding something too difficult, then it becomes study reading. So if the book is too difficult for them, but they really want to read that book, let them have it. It's very important that they read something they're interested in. We also need to make sure the students can monitor their reading and self-check, do I understand this? Is this something that I understand? Is it something that is engaging? Is it something that I'm interested in? If not, then we need to ask the students maybe to change and find a different book. You also need to make sure that they feel comfortable that they can talk to you if they're facing troubles. Many students, if you ask them, do you understand? They will, of course, say yes. So what you need to do is to actually test them and check that they understand by asking them, what does that mean? What does this word mean? What did John do? And if they can't tell you, then clearly they have a comprehension problem. So if they realize that they don't understand, then say, next time, please talk to me about that. Or if you have help, put your hand up. So you need a safe, comfortable reading environment for them. In some classes, particularly upper level students, teenagers and above, sometimes they are not actually reading, they're faking reading. They are pretending to read when they don't. So again, check their comprehension, maybe by some follow-up activities and that type of thing. And we need to help them keep their motivation for reading. And that's the reason for the talk today. However, when we're talking about students who are not motivated to read, we need to understand there are 2 possible reasons for this, and there are different types of readers. The bookworm is someone who already loves reading. They just live in books, and these people we don't need to worry about. However, there are 2 other categories of learners we do need to look at: reluctant readers and struggling readers. And there's an important difference between these 2. Reluctant readers will read if they have to. They choose not to. For some reason, they've chosen not to read. And we'll talk about this later. Struggling readers are having difficulties. It's not that they don't want to read. They probably want to read, but they can't read or have trouble reading, and for many issues. It might be a language issue. Maybe they don't know the vocabulary. Maybe they don't know the grammar. Maybe they're not familiar with the content, or maybe they have processing issues. So how do we know who struggling readers are? These are the ones who are having trouble, not just the ones who are being lazy. These are the ones who are having trouble. So these students often want to read, but have issues with, as I said, the language. They have trouble finding material at the right level. Maybe they're having problems with the content of the material. Maybe they don't understand the background. Maybe the text that is in the book you've given them is too hard, or they're just not familiar. For example, many students might not be familiar with 19th century UK, or they might not be familiar with a particular science text that you've given them. So they may struggle because of that. So we have an information gap. They may struggle to find time or a place to read. There may be no time in their week. Maybe they've got clubs or things to do. Maybe they need to help parents at home. Maybe there's no quiet place to read at home. Maybe there's no culture of reading at home. So maybe they don't identify themselves as a reader. Maybe they don't see themselves as a reader at all, or might even consider reading as not cool. Some of these students may lack confidence or lack self-esteem, and we'll come to this later. Their attitude to reading may be quite poor, and that might be learned from previous experience. So maybe a previous trauma, maybe where a student has had a very bad reading experience, maybe a reading teacher shouted at them, or somebody complained to them, or they tried to read something out loud to the class but failed. So this will dent their confidence, and some form of reading trauma they may have. Or it may be something outside their school life. Maybe they're just too busy, or they have to help grandma, or some other reason they just can't get to the reading. Or an inability to process language normally. So what do I mean by this? So mild processing issues we might call dyslexia. These are problems in the brain, often connected to genes. This is not a problem with the book. This is not a problem with the teacher. This is a problem with what's happening in the brain. So some students may, for example, read cup in this way, cub or cud or cuck. They can't quite see how the words are, how they go together, how to read them. They cannot read the words or read the letters clearly. And similarly here, they may swap words. They may see the B instead of a D. They may see a F instead of a T, and so on. And in Hangul, you may find that students will read these or misread them. They would see them the wrong way around. Those are for the relatively mild versions of dyslexia. There are more severe problems that students may have. And they may see, for example, text like this. They may see blurred text like you will see here. They may read text like this is how they may read. Though gift see dyslexia is the ability to think. So they may not be able to see individual letters here. They may see that the text itself is going in circles, or they may see spaces slightly differently. So these are quite serious issues that some students have. And so we need to be aware of dyslexia. This is a neurological, this is a brain condition. This is not a language problem. So dyslexia is the most common learning disorder. 80% of learning disorders are accounted for by dyslexia. Interestingly, between 15 to 20% of people have some signs of dyslexia, some usually very, very minor, very, very small, but about 15 to 20% of people have this issue. It's a much bigger issue than often we recognize. 70 to 80% of people with poor reading skills often are dyslexics. It can affect their comprehension at the letter level, the word level, the sentence level, and even their ability to write. Not type. Typing is usually not a problem for dyslexics, but handwriting is. And this type of issue runs in families. It's not only affecting reading, it can also affect other brain functions, such as your sense of direction, maybe your sense of distance, maybe your visual recognition of phases, or your sense of numbers, sense of time. So dyslexic and learning or disorders can affect lots and lots of affect you in many different ways. Also, interestingly, is you can be dyslexic in one language but not in the other. So For example, you could be perfectly normal reader in Korean or Spanish, but you would be dyslexic in English. So it's possible, for example, and part of the reason for that is that sometimes languages are processed in different parts of the brain. Chinese students who have what we call a logographic writing system, that is, they have kanji, they have pictures, they have characters, are processed in a different part of the brain from English dyslexics. But where you have the alphabet is shared between, say, Spanish and English, therefore there tends not to be difference in dyslexia in one language but not in the other. They tend to be dyslexic in both or neither. So these are quite serious issues, and I would encourage you as a reading teacher to be aware of the possibility that the reason your students are not motivated might be something connected with this. So the signs of a struggling reader would be children who take time to master the spelling and phonics system. They take longer than normal. They often be slower than their peers. It may be they have bad eyesight. Maybe they have bad hearing. Maybe they've got poor coordination, or as I say, dyslexia. However, the good news is that most struggling readers can become normal readers with the right help at the right time. So I would definitely encourage you as a teacher to look for some of these signs. And I have here a whole long list of more signs that you can look at. So there are signs to watch for students before they start school and students who are of school age. Now, I'm not going to read all of these. You can download these slides later and you can go through them yourself. So if you think there may be one or two students in your class who you think exhibit these types of behavior, they talk later than other students, they learn words slowly, they have problems sounding out words, they don't pick up nursery rhymes as quick as other students, maybe they have problems finding words or they mispronounce names, maybe they have difficulty summarizing a story, they have trouble understanding idioms, and so on, and so on, and so on. If you have students with these sorts of difficulties, then you need to make sure that they get the proper treatment. So students with dyslexic behaviors often avoid reading. They read slowly, they have trouble reading aloud, especially new words. They often still make spelling mistakes even after they've just checked their spelling. Many of the students who are dyslexic actually are quite intelligent, they're bright, they're what we might call normal people, but they struggle with reading and writing and on tests. However, because they don't do well on tests and they don't do well academically, sometimes these students can get mislabeled as lazy, careless, immature, or just simply problem students. Often these students have failed to read or failed to write something or failed with their reading experiences. They feel they're not so smart as their friends. They often have low self-esteem. And what they try to do very often is to cover up their weakness. They use strategies to compensate. They become easily frustrated or emotional, especially if there's a test coming up or they have to read, especially read aloud in front of students, or they have to write in front of the teacher. If you're giving them silent reading, some of these students may get sleepy when reading, they may get headaches, and they may clench their teeth, as you can see this boy here. Many of them believe that if they have reading difficulties, therefore they will always be a poor reader, and therefore they try to hide this. They do everything that they can to not let people know they're struggling with reading. If you do have children with these symptoms, please find an experienced professional to help them. However, because a student exhibits these behaviors does not necessarily mean they are dyslexic. So, but many dyslexics do exhibit these behaviors. So it's important, therefore, to find out who these students are. So we need some one-on-one time to find out who these poor readers are. So get them to sound out words in front of you, check their comprehension skills, identify weaknesses, point out where they've made mistakes, for example. So this type of time one-on-one with students is vital to identify these students who are having problem. So we should need to do that. For students who are dyslexic, who are struggling with reading, sometimes using all of their senses can be useful. So instead of asking them to write, maybe you could ask them to write in the air. Maybe you could ask them to spell by moving different letters like this. Ask them and get them to trace with their finger what the letter would be. If they're having problems spelling, get them to actually do it with their finger, not just with a pen. Get them to tap out sounds, get them to build words with letters and things like that, or even use sand so they can write in the sand. And these multi-sensory input from touch, from listening, can make a difference and really help students to improve. So those are what we call the struggling readers. Those are the ones with sort of learning difficulties. And as I say, a lot of the reason that some of the students are not motivated to read is because they have these types of issues. So please look for those types of things and then bring in a professional or get training for yourself. So we're now going to spend the rest of the session really looking at reluctant readers. Reluctant readers are different. Reluctant readers don't have processing issues. They are what we might call normal in that sense. They can read and write normally, but they just choose not to for a reason. It might be they don't have much reading experience. Maybe they don't value reading. Maybe nobody reads at home. Maybe the teacher doesn't read in front of them. Maybe there's no obvious library in the school or in the classroom. Often the reluctant readers prefer short, easy tasks. And if you give them a long book, there's something that they dread. They hate the idea of doing something long. Maybe some of these books haven't found a home run book yet. They haven't found that one book which switches them on to reading. And for them, the reading is not considered valuable or important. So it may be they have little access to books or good reading materials, or the materials they've got are boring or not that interesting, they're wrong age, they look old, the books are falling to pieces. Or sometimes they don't want to be called a reading nerd or bookish. Many students consider themselves too cool for school, and to be seen as sort of academic is kind of like just not cool. So we need to work on that type of an attitude. So one of the things that, again, we need to look at for reluctant reading behaviors is they exhibit many of the types of behaviors that struggling readers do. They read because they have to. Often they would have low self-esteem. And sometimes they choose not to read because they say, oh, it's too noisy in here, or my eyes are bad, it's too dark, or it's unfair we have to read this book, or the text is too small. So they find reasons not to read. So watch out for those types of behavior. And if you ask them, can you read well? Often they will rarely say, no, I can't read well. They will nearly always try to hide it. So they develop this sense of helplessness, and they become frustrated and skilled evaders. They know how to avoid doing the reading. Oh, I left my book at home. Oh, the book fell out. Oh, my cat ate my book. That type of thing, yeah? And often they don't want to challenge themselves. So what they're in this, what we call a comfort zone. They're in this safe and comfortable zone, and they're afraid of going into the fear zone where they need to stretch themselves. So they're afraid of this next zone of learning. And it's only when they've got past their fear can they move into the learning zone and then into the growth zone. So we need to try to have activities to push students a little bit more this way. However, quite a lot of teaching practice that we have might accidentally be creating reluctant readers. So we need to be aware of the things that we do. And what are we doing that might create the conditions where reluctant readers may be born? So we may encourage our students to become reluctant readers when we only give them text to study. So every reading text we give them a test afterwards. We ask them to use their dictionary. It's difficult material. We test them on everything. So they learn that, oh, I have to read, oh, here's the test. So teachers sometimes rely on the textbook to teach the skill of reading. The fluency side of reading you will not learn from a textbook. So because teachers don't give the students fluency activities, therefore the students are restricted to only learning from textbooks. Or we give them something too difficult to read, there's something not interesting, something they're not enthusiastic about, and by teachers not giving reading time, it gives the message that reading's not important. So teachers often may not engage them with what they read, or may not care what they read, and restrict them to choose only what we want them to read. So if these are some of the things that's happening in your class, maybe there are good reasons that you're doing them. But from a student's perspective, it's important, I think, to ask yourself, would I like to be a student in my class? Would it be an enjoyable place? Could I learn to read in my class? And this is an essential question that we have as reading teachers. So one of the key first points is to know your students. Who are they exactly? And I don't just mean how old are they, what's their gender, what's their school year, their hometown. No. What do they like doing? What are their interests? What do they hate doing? Do they have any dreams? What experiences can they share with us, either good or bad? And how much time do they realistically have for reading? We might say assign them an hour of reading a week, but they may not have an hour of reading time because they're busy at home, they've got a club, they've got evening school, and many other things. So it's important to sit with the students one-on-one at the beginning of a school year and conduct a needs and a dream analysis. Find out about your students so you can bring in the right reading materials for them. In my experience, everybody likes to read. We often hear that, you know, oh, people from my country don't like to read, but people are reading all the time. So they read on the train, they're picking up their smartphone all the time. In fact, so much so that we have to ban students from using the smartphone in class. And this cartoon illustrates it quite well. This is a father talking to his son. Calvin, your mum and I looked over your report card and we think you could be doing better. But I don't like school. Why not? You like to read, you like to learn. I know you do. I mean, you've read every dinosaur book ever written. And you learned a lot, right? Reading and learning are fun. Yeah. So why don't you like school? We don't read about dinosaurs. So this is a critical point. If we don't have interesting material that they are interested in, they simply will not engage with the classes. A key thing that we need to focus on is focus on the long goal. So our focus as reading teachers is not just our class, is how do we develop them to learn the skills, learn the language, learn the necessary things they need to have to become a lifelong reader, not just in my class, but how can I prepare them for the next class and the next class and the next class? How can we make them independent learners? So do not worry about this week's successes and failures. Think about the long term. Focus on the long goal. How is this student doing? Are they reading more than before? Are they reading more confidently than before? And try to appreciate their reading, and try to, if you can, avoid being a helicopter teacher, just watching everything they read, testing everything that they do, or be the drone parent. Try to avoid overcorrecting and only praise when they earn it. So focus on the long goal, not the short-term goal, yeah? So very often as teachers, we need to just shut up and get out of their way. Sometimes we teach too much, or we make them study too much and not enough language practice. Sometimes the more we leave them alone, the more they will learn. So our model for learning is often like this, and sometimes we just need to leave them alone and they will do fine. So a key factor is to build their confidence. So they can do this with their fluent reading by reading within their ability level at first. They build confidence with something that they can do now and increase the challenge over time. So they start with something easy and they move up later. And they're building off successful reading achievements. So to do this, they need to discuss and share the problems so they don't feel alone. As I said, those students who are reluctant readers or struggling readers may not want to share. So we need to build this sharing environment, this it's okay not to understand attitude in class is fine. It's also important as a teacher that we praise students in the right way to build long-term confidence. So when you praise students, we should praise effort, praise their grit, their determination, and their perseverance. So we should say things like, you worked hard on this, or I noticed your positive attitude. I can tell you studied hard. I love how you drew that picture. I love how you told that story. Well done, you figured that out. We should try, if we can, to avoid praising for scores. Things like, oh, you're smart, or well done for getting the top score, or the worst one of all, you are cute. That's not a good way to develop confidence in a student. That's the wrong message. So it's important to focus on their effort so that you are praising them for what they've done. Don't praise them on their performance or for their score. So therefore, in that way, we should try to avoid using grades as a motivator. Grades are important. We need to find out how they're going, but don't use it as a motivator. Grades are short-term motivators. So we need to focus on the process of developing their reading ability and focus on the students. By emphasizing grades and winners often can demotivate. It can motivate the students at the top of the class, but probably demotivate many of the others who just simply don't care about being the leader or don't feel they can be the leader. We often find that students make more progress when they're not focused on grades. The other downside of focusing on grades, particularly at the older student level, is that it might encourage cheating. So we need to focus on the process of learning, not so much on the grades themselves. Therefore, it's important to make sure students are reading at the right level. So the students need to ask themselves, can I read something quickly and enjoyably with adequate comprehension so they don't need a dictionary? If students can ask this question of themselves, then they are R-E-A-D, they are reading. And if they can self-monitor, then yes, they're doing extensive reading. If not, they're doing study reading. Nothing wrong with study reading, but if we want to make sure they're understanding, then we need to make sure that they can self-monitor by asking themselves this question. So therefore, we need to make sure they are reading by providing lots of interesting materials, a wide variety of materials, easy and interesting materials. So rereading something again is okay, and asking them to read aloud sometimes is okay, to you probably, but they should read for general understanding. They're not reading to learn, they're not reading to learn language, they're reading to learn the information from it, yeah? We need to train them also to ignore unknown words. Just continue reading, continue reading. If they have communication breakdown, then they should go back and have a look. So they should try to be comfortable with not understanding everything and make a relaxed atmosphere so they can enjoy the reading. So one way to do this is through the 5-finger rule. So the first thing they don't understand, 1 word per page they don't understand, 2 words per page, 3 words. If there's more than 5 words per page, then they're probably going to end up like this. So this is a mental skill you can get the students to do, to sort of count as they read a page how many words that they don't know. And if there's too many, then often it may be too difficult. So there's a relationship, therefore, between comprehension and speed. If the reading is slow and intentional, high effort, and there's frequent loss of comprehension, this can be demotivating. We call this reading pain, and we should avoid this at all costs. If the reading is slow with pauses, with loss of comprehension, but they understand something, and they often need to use a dictionary, this we might call intensive or study reading, and that's probably okay, but they tend to use a pencil when they're doing this. However, if the reading is fast and fluent, very few pauses, high comprehension, high involvement in what they're reading, and they're being lost in the flow of reading, then we would call this extensive reading. So when we're choosing material for the students, it's important that we make sure the students are reading the right kinds of materials. If the book is too difficult, the student will not understand. Therefore, they read slowly. Therefore, they don't enjoy reading. Therefore, they don't read much. And we have this vicious circle of reading. What we do need to do is try to find easy materials so the student will understand better, they will read faster, they will enjoy their reading, and therefore they read more. So it's critical here that we have the right types of materials for the students. So building fluency is going to be key for them as well. So help them to build reading speed, so they're reading not just word by word or letter by letter, but they're reading at the faster level where they can process whole chunks of language in one process. And they can read at the idea, they read the idea and idea and idea. So the faster they read, they'll be processing ideas rather than letters and words. Yeah. So we need to build fluency and reading speed. So reading speed activities are very, very valuable. It also allows them to save time for other things, especially if they're taking a formal test. One of the reasons that students don't do well on standard tests is they don't have time to read it, read fast enough before they get to the end of the test. They cannot read fast enough, therefore they miss the end of the test. If you can read faster, then you'll be able to get to the end of the test, and there's more likelihood you'll have more time to finish the test. Also, if they read faster, they will enjoy it more and they will remember more because, as I said, they're processing ideas, they're not processing words. So again, what type of books do we need to make sure the students have? They should be books, of course, with high frequency, useful words. And they should be written so that they can recycle and strengthen the knowledge. And they should work together as a system and allow students to read smoothly and easily and read with confidence. So this is the type of reading materials that we should introduce to our students. So we need to make sure that the system is not random. Very often our courses look something like this, with something new taught in each unit. And this is, our textbook is introducing language. However, we need to make sure that this grammar and this vocabulary get recycled. We need to make sure that this language comes again. So that's what we do with graded readers. Graded readers are written to recycle that language, not this language, not that language. This language comes in level 2. So these things we're teaching in our book would come in level 2, but also we recycle what happened in unit 1 and unit 2. And the same with unit 3 recycles what happens previously. So this is systematic, non-random input, which is building on previous knowledge, especially important for younger learners. So it's important we choose the right books that are easy, that they can read quickly and smoothly, so they read a lot and it's enjoyable. And as I said before, what is easy? It means they don't need a dictionary. They understand almost everything. Their eye is moving quickly across the page and they are reading. Yes, they're in this idea of flow. They're not bored. They're not anxious. They're in this idea of flow in the middle here. So these are some examples of some books that the students should be reading. I'm sure you're familiar with some of the efuture books. Please take a look at the catalogue. So these readers are what we call graded readers, that start with the phonics level down here, that start with easy vocabulary and easy grammar, that go to more difficult levels. So the idea is that the students would end up with native materials here. So they read books at this level, and they would move up, move up, move up to material which eventually would be material for native material. So the easiest books have very, very few words, very basic vocabulary, very conversational. The next level up would have a little bit more difficult vocabulary, more basic tenses, very simple plot, but a little bit longer. At the next level, a little bit more difficult vocabulary, more difficult grammar, harder plot, fewer pictures. And as we see as we go up, we can see there is longer texts, fewer pictures, more words per book. And this is systematically building on a previous knowledge. So it's important that students are able to read systematically by increasing their knowledge. They also need to read a lot. By reading a lot, they meet a lot of words. So if students are reading 2 or 3 books a week, in 1 month, they're going to read the same amount of words as in a typical English textbook for 1 year. English textbooks don't have a lot of words in them. But if they're reading 2 or 3 books a week, 1 month of reading is about the same amount of reading text as 1 textbook. So it's important that they read as much as possible. The next thing we should try to do, particularly for older children, is to try to get them to set and monitor their own goals. Rather than impose a reading amount, get them to set them. And we often find that if you ask students to set their own goals, they often suggest more than the teacher does, particularly if you explain to them about how much reading needs to be done. If we say to them, for example, you need 2 to 3 books a week, how much do you think they will do? They will probably do 2 or 3 books a week or even more. So when this needs to, if you're going to ask them to set their goals, make sure that this is done as a class, because there will always be some lazy ones that say, I don't want to do any reading. So they might want to also have different reading goals. And here's a little worksheet where they can focus on how they read. This is a self-check list for them. The next thing we can do is to add a challenge for them. We can challenge them to read a more difficult topic. We can have reading races or reading competitions. We can add games like stars and buttons and points and competitive tasks and leaderboard. But again, be careful. These may act as a motivator for some students, but not for others. But if we can, try to set high reading goals for the amount, set reading speed goals, and try to get them a little bit outside their comfort goal. So a kind of fun activity you can get them to read is this one we call extreme reading competition. Get them to take a book and take a photo of them reading in some strange situation. They can have a little bit of fun. You could set this as a summer reading activity where they can take a picture of them with a book reading somewhere like this. You can do this as a little fun activity over the weekend, or as I say, as summer reading, yeah? But nothing dangerous like this. Right? These pictures are not allowed. They're not allowed to do this. And no Photoshop. Photoshop is not allowed either. Okay? So that's a challenge that you could give to the students. The next thing to motivate your students will be to make sure that it's relevant. So we need to make sure, as I said at the beginning, to find out how much they read. What do they like to read? Maybe you can give a questionnaire and find out what kind of things they read other than books. They might like magazines, brochures, manuals, newspapers. Connect to them with the things that they like to read at home and try to bring in this material from outside, not just school materials. Another thing that's important is to make it meaningful through what we call inquiry-based learning. In this approach to learning is quite different from traditional learning. It's based on the idea of students asking or forming a question. They go and investigate something. They then create something, they discuss it, and they reflect and go round in this cycle. So they have these various stages of learning students go through. And the idea here is to get them naturally interested in the topic. Because they're interested in the topic, they then need to read something to find out information about the question they're interested in. So here's an example. Maybe they're interested in how seeds become plants. Right? So this is maybe a question in your English class. So this would be a question they want to find out. So what do they need to do? They need to maybe group A could read about photosynthesis. Group B could read about what type of materials we need to grow plants, and then how to grow seeds. So they can read up about this. They would create a small project, a small indoor garden, for example. They would then discuss the best way to make them grow, turning the reading into action. And then in the end, they might work out why did the seeds grow, why did they not grow, what's going on, and they could write a report or make a presentation. So in this way, that we can get them to read about the topic when they're trying to do something else. So this is a much deeper way of approaching learning, inquiry-based learning. The next thing we need to do is to try to extend this reading. So we can have inquiry-based learning move into extending reading. So let's say, for example, your students have read this book. You could ask particularly older children to go and research maybe one aspect of the story. What is country life like in the mid-20th century? What happened in the context of the railway children? What was going on in the world at the time? They could research the author, the history of the book, or they could research the characters, the clothes, or habits, or something like that. So they could extend their knowledge of the world beyond the reading that they do. This could be done in groups or individually. And so again, they have to read more. And this gives them an intrinsic reason to read rather than an extrinsic motivator. It's important to build reading communities. So buddy reading, where you're reading together, is important so they can share knowledge. And allow students to write smiley faces in the book. If they like the book, then they'd write a smiley face. And so when the other students open the book, they can see if it's a good book or not. Also, try to engage students into the reading program. Get them to become junior librarians. Let them help choose books for the library. These things help to engage them into the library and will help them to learn more about the library. If you can as well, when the students have finished their reading, try to get them to use movement. So asking students to sit quietly at their desk for a long period is very, very hard for particularly younger students. So get them to act out the characters from the story, turn it into a play, get them to make a presentation. They can use a paper materials to do a little paper play here with boards and so on, and little paper puppets. Or older students could maybe give a presentation. So use movement to help them to understand. Of course, reading aloud is very important. I'm sure most of you already do this. But when you read aloud, try to read aloud in an enthusiastic voice. Try to convey excitement and a fascination with the topic. If you read in a very boring way, the students are not going to be interested. If you're uncomfortable about your own pronunciation, very often with graded readers, you can download the actual audio from the website, and you could use that instead. The next thing is to have an interesting library. So make sure we have book displays. You can get students to help make these things, get it so that the books are face out. And one of my friends has this as a mystery library. Yeah, mystery books here. You don't know what they are. Yeah, it's a kind of joke on the students. So try to have an interesting library where you hopefully have a librarian who can help them to choose books. And try to have it so the books are on display like this. So it's quite easy. It looks like a good place to go. It looks like there's lots to read. So this type of library is very, very important. If you could have CDs, for example, CD players, have books around the normal classroom, and have maybe student reports about the books that they've read. These are pictures of what students have been reading, so the students can see what the other students are doing. But not like this. Please don't have a library like this. This is the most boring type of library. We cannot see the books. It's not interesting. Please don't have a library like this. But the next thing we need to do is to make sure the students understand the library system. If you have books at various difficulty levels, let's say the easiest books are brown, next books are yellow, and we move up to the difficulty levels, then put some color tape onto the book so the students know what the books are. So they would know I'm a yellow reader or I'm a pink reader and so on. This can help motivate the students so they're not wasting time looking to find a book. Try to find a book at your level here is just a really daunting task and is not a very good way to do that. And also in the library, make sure the books are categorized so the students can easily find what they're reading. It's also important to get students to do library treasure hunts. So when they're new to the library, give them a worksheet, something like this, to go and find a book about a country or a biography or a DVD. Go find a magazine, go find the help desk, find a book with ice cream in it, find a book with a castle in it. And they can do this type of activity. And what you're doing secretly here is getting them used to the library so they will find books that maybe in the future they want to read again. And this can motivate them to find things that they need. If your students are having trouble reading, then making it oral, letting them listen to text, as I mentioned before, and turning it into a serial story. So, for example, read chapter 1 today, chapter 2 tomorrow, chapter 3 the next day, chapter 4 the day after, and take it on like a drama or on TV. That's a very important thing. Or if you wish, you can get the student, just copy the images from a book and students can put the pictures in order. They can listen and put the pictures from the book in order. We can also get them to read and listen and read, or listen while reading. And online listening is very important. But when you're doing this, try not to just repeat the same task. You could maybe listen for errors. So you might want to intentionally read something aloud with errors in it. So they have to listen intentionally. No, that's a mistake. That's a mistake. So intentionally tricking them to do that makes them listen more carefully, yeah? Get them to listen for background sounds and tone and voice. Does he sound angry? Does he sound excited? And so on, yeah? And make sure they listen and compare understanding after each chapter, if you can. You could also get them to make videos. And here I have a very short video of this boy and this girl here making a video about what they've been reading. So these types of things are very, very powerful. And you can guarantee that students will want to share what they've done, and they're going to practice again and again and again and again to get this right. So if you want to do this formally, you could then maybe use Flipgrid, which is a wonderful website where you can get the students to record their books, their reading reports on here, and monitor that. So Flipgrid's a wonderful place to do this, and students can comment on each other's videos. Or you can get them to make a video and stick it up on YouTube. This is a friend of mine in Indonesia, has a book review website and on YouTube, a book review channel, and all of her students will keep their reviews on there. Another way you can get them more recently is to use VR technologies. So get them to make cardboard VR goggles if you want to know how to make these things. Here's a video. They put their smartphone inside it, and then they can read a story or listen to a story, maybe from YouTube, and then retell their stories to a friend. So there are many, many websites where they can use these things. They can have this listening experience, this reading experience through the VR goggles. And as I say, they're made with cardboard, so it costs no money at all. And they can have that as another type of experience. If they didn't enjoy the story, you might want to ask them if they want to rewrite the story, right? Maybe they want to turn the reading into writing. They could maybe write the story in bubbles and then read it to another student or show it to another student, or more advanced students could maybe rewrite the story completely by changing the ending to the story, adding character profiles, and so on. So with struggling readers and reluctant readers, make sure we have clear instructions to avoid confusion. Make sure that students apply the information. So very important, phonics is a big help here. Make sure that we're building on previous learning. Go slowly if you need to. So you need to plan your reading program carefully. Try to add one new thing at a time. Don't try and add many, many new things together for struggling readers. Make sure you teach reliable rules, rules that you know students can get. Not difficult things like, here's the present perfect tense, which is a nightmare. Here's a and the, these are a nightmare. So try and have nice, easy rules. Teach reading and spelling separately if you can. They're not the same. Writing is often harder than reading, yes? So short and frequent lessons are better than long, 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 heavy lessons on reading skill development. And as I say, try to build reading and language ability with sensory inputs. So if you want to find out some more reading activities, we have the Extensive Reading Foundation, which I'm a part of, has lots of ER activities in this guidebook. And you can find this in the ER Extensive Reading Foundation website. And the website is down here. The website, if you want to find out more about extensive reading, we have guidebooks, a bibliography for research, reading calculators. You can find the best books. There's a YouTube channel. We have grants if you need money for your program, and lots of different affiliate organizations. There's a ER association in Korea. So if you want to find out more, the Extensive Reading Foundation is very useful, and we have a Facebook page as well. If you want to learn more about extensive reading, there is on August the 15th this year, there is an online conference with Paul Nation, who's giving our plenary talk, which is going to happen over a 3-day period. You can register using this here. all go to there and get the information. This is online. However, next year in August, in Indonesia, we have the 6th World Congress on Extensive Reading. I would encourage you to physically come along, meet other teachers from other areas and learn about extensive reading and how to motivate your readers. So that's all that I have for today. If you wish, here is the PDF of the slides that I have just given you. And we have just 2 to 3 minutes for some questions. How would we like to organize this? Maybe I will stop my share, my screen. No, I'll leave that up while you take the QR code.
Yep. So you guys can try to fit the QR code there. And we do have a few questions here in the Q&A box.
Okay, could you please read one or two out for me?
Yep. So first one here. Should I, as a teacher, make different reading groups according to the student's skills? From Maria Lee.
There's a time that, yes, that's important so that you can treat them and deal with them with their particular difficulties. However, students need to have all of the skills. So sometimes it's important for you to keep them in one group and deal with the students who are having, say, letter discrimination. Maybe they're having problems sounding out. Deal with those students as a group, deal with another student as a group. You may want to also bring them all together so that everybody has instruction. But this is a key point for you to identify their needs very, very early, to identify what the various groups are and try to give the instruction as needed. You may need to bring in a second reading teacher or have extra reading classes for those who are experiencing difficulty. But it's important for students not to just keep in groups, but also share. So the answer is yes, when you're dealing with their problems, but generally try to keep them as a group. Try to find activities which are encouraging everybody to read, not just, and everybody to participate, not just focus on one or two key good students, yeah? Okay, another question, please.
Yep, one more. How can I, or what can I do if students who struggle reading become reluctant readers?
What can I do if students are becoming
reluctant readers, or are becoming.
Well, the first thing is go and talk to them. Find out what's going on. I mean, don't put any pressure on them. Absolutely do not blame them. Do not shame them. Do not dent their confidence. Just find out what's going on. It might be something outside the class. Maybe there's some bullying in the class. Maybe the material's too difficult. Maybe they've got reading difficulties. Maybe there's a problem at home. Maybe they just lack confidence. Maybe they're lazy. Maybe they're busy with club. Maybe they're whatever. So first of all, find out the reason why. Sit them to one side as much as you can. But don't single them out and say, Johnny, please come and talk to me. And all the other students are noticing you talk to Johnny. Find a private time to do that. It's important to have little one-on-one interviews. And identify some of those behaviors and work out what's going on. If you're not comfortable trying to resolve particularly the struggling readers' issues, then you need to maybe ask your school to bring in a professional who can deal with dyslexic students who are having problems with dyslexia and processing disorders, because it's not a reading problem, it's a whole learning problem, and it will affect their math, affect their history, affect their science, and will slow them down. So reading is a very, very good way to identify these students who are having learning disorders. So as reading teachers, we need to be especially aware of what our students can and can't do. Writing teachers in a similar way. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so I do see some comments in here. If the QR code isn't working, we will send the file out to you guys in a follow-up email with Zoom. So there seems to be some people with their mobile not working, and I tested it myself and I was able to access it. So it might be
okay, fine.
Yeah, so it might be a.
What I'll do then is I will put the link directly into the chat window for you.
Okay, yeah, so we'll put the link in the chat for those of you, and you can download the presentation from there. So just a few things before we wrap up today. So thank you again, Dr. Rob Waring, for your very insightful presentation today. I'm sure everyone here was pleased, and we learned a lot on how to help with the big problem of getting students to read, especially nowadays. Okay, so with efuture, I'm proud to bring you guys these webinars. We're going to be continuing all these webinars for the rest of this year. We have a lot planned for you guys. So to keep all the updates going, be sure to follow us on social media. We post our webinar schedules both on Facebook and Instagram. We have a lot of resources on our YouTube channel as well. So we have activity ideas, model lessons, all of our recordings. So this webinar will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel as well. So if you guys want to review anything that was covered and elaborated on in today's presentation, they will be uploaded onto YouTube this week. We've been quite quick with our turnaround, so they will be up there soon. And
okay.
I'll go ahead. Rob?
I'm just going to say, if anybody has a direct question for me, please send them to efuture. They will forward it to me, and I will respond to all of the questions in one email. If you have any questions at all you want to ask about this or anything connected with extensive reading or motivating learners, send them to efuture, and they will pass them to me, and I will respond hopefully by the weekend.
Yep. Yeah. So if you want to do that, you can see on the bottom here, inquiry@eltkorea.com. That's where you can kind of forward your questions. We can get them to Dr. Rob Waring. So also with these emails, for all of you that attended today, for your certificates, depending on where you are in the world, these are the people and the places that you can contact to receive your certificates. Okay. So if your country is not here, be sure just to email us directly and we will get you your attendee certificate through here. And one final thing, I saw my colleagues have posted the link in the chat. We'd like to hear your feedback, anything that efuture can do to improve our webinars, or if there are any topics that you guys would like us to cover in the future. We would love to hear you guys and make sure that we are helping you the best that we can during all these tough times and with the pandemic going on. So with that, I'd like to thank again Dr. Rob Waring for today's webinar and presentation. And we will see you guys next month. So keep on the lookout for our webinar schedule for July. We do have more coming up soon, right? So take care, everyone, and have a nice day or have a good evening wherever you are. Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.